Well, Facebook changing its tune and lifting the ban on posts claiming that COVID-19 was man-made. Apparently, it's not so conspiratory after all. But the issue of social media giants censoring posts goes well beyond, of course, COVID's origins. Jackie DeAngelis joins me now with more. Jackie.
Good afternoon to you, Charles. Well, big tech, some social media companies, they're basically stifling the conversation that they don't like. We have been talking about Facebook, YouTube, and Google, and their crackdown on COVID-19 commentary. But it does go way beyond that. In fact, it's gotten so bad in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis signed legislation to penalize social media companies for barring speech of political candidates. It's such a touchy subject that it could go to federal court. On that issue, the governor said this. Listen.
Any Floridian who is deplatformed or censored would potentially have a right to sue big tech. We're making tech be transparent on their algorithms and on their terms of service and the criteria they use because they don't apply it fairly.
Speaking of Governor DeSantis, by the way, note that YouTube banned his roundtable on mask science. All right, what's interesting now is how big tech also flip-flops on the issue, Charles. We've been reporting on how Facebook was banning these posts that said that COVID-19 came from a lab. Then poof, they issued the statement and they said they would stop doing it, and that was the end of the conversation. Think back also with Amazon to when they banned Alex Berenson's book. It was called Unreported Truths About COVID-19 and Lockdowns. Well, Amazon flipped and allowed the sales after a huge backlash. Then there was, of course, the New York Post story about Hunter Biden's laptop before the election. Banned, not banned, flip-flopping all over the place. But the initial banning, it does damage, Charles. It sways opinions and it's powerful. And we'll have to see where this conversation goes throughout the rest of the year, because this was the year that we were supposed to see some regulation on big tech and social media.
Bingo. The initial impact is the main impact, and most of the time that's the long-term narrative. Jackie, thank you very much. Sure. Now I want to bring in District Media President Beverly Hallberg. And, you know, Beverly, I think this is it says a lot about social media, right? Being judge, jury, and execution. And when it comes to operating the public forum, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, the censorship by big tech during COVID has really been stunning. You add the political angle to this as well, considering the Hunter Biden story that was just mentioned, and it really does a lot of damage. And the question we have to ask ourselves is whether or not big tech is still part of the free market. Do we still have other options for conservatives so that they can vote with their feet and leave and go somewhere else? Or is this more of a monopoly? Because I think the issue of government involvement and regulation gets really tricky, because is government regulation really going to solve the problem? I understand the initial problem. I lean more towards when people vote with their feet, when there is an outcry and these social media platforms change. I think that those are the victories that we should hold on to, as well as hoping more startups pop up across the country.
The problem with that, and I tend to agree with you in principle, but you know, you had the Parlors of the world, and they had their own individual fights, and these guys have created such a massive footprint. It's tough, and I'm not one to break up monopolies, but they are a de facto, they are de facto monopolies, aren't they?
And that's where the monopoly angle, I think that there is a room for government intervention at that point. I mean, look how big Amazon is. That's the place where everybody gets their books. Even think of Facebook. This is where most people get their news. So it does make a big difference when for a year they've been suppressing information on the origins of where the coronavirus came from. What they've really have done with all of this is they have been beholden to politics and politicians instead of being, especially on Facebook, allowing it to be a place of open dialogue, which, by the way, if there are conspiracy theories that are damaging, you bring it out into the light. You let people debunk it. You let people counter it. Yet they're shoving this down, and often what they're shoving down is the truth.
Hey, and I read a piece over the weekend, and it said that the absolute worst advice that you can give a young adult was to follow their dreams. So, believe it or not, I thought about you. I mean, what would you tell a young adult about that?
I wouldn't say it's the absolute worst advice. I think there's plenty of other bad advice we can give. But here's what I think this fits into is how people view their careers. A lot of times young people have a passion about a certain sector or a certain hobby, and they decide that they want to major in that in college. Take philosophy, for instance. If you major in philosophy, there aren't many jobs for you. So I think passions are great for people to use as hobbies, to take interest in. But when you're focusing on your career, think about what your skill set is and where the job market is. That is how you help a young person move forward with their finances in the future.
And of course, passions evolve as people evolve too. So you don't want to box yourself in at an early age. Beverly, thanks so much. Great talking to you as always.